Julia Butterfly Hill, who is up in a tree, 180 feet above ground in a redwood, over 1,000 years old, and the tree is named Luna. Hi, Julia.
Hello, Dennis.
How did you get involved with Luna?
Well, it kind of began in August of 1996 when I was involved in a serious car accident that took 10 months to recover from. And during that time, I really realized how false of a reality society has created for us as sacred beings, that our society today has done away with the sacred and replaced it with money and greed and selfishness. And that really, really hit me, because the wreck made me realize that there was something a lot more important, a lot deeper for my life than to just play into the game of work, work, consume, consume. So I went on a spiritual journey that I thought was going to take me around the world, but instead it brought me out to the beautiful ancient redwoods of Northern California. When I first entered these forests, I fell to my knees and I began to cry because of the power and the life force and the spirituality that were held in these beautiful, majestic cathedrals of the planet. Then a few weeks later, I found out that these forests were being turned into clear cuts and mudslides by Pacific Lumber Maxam Corporation. And I knew that I couldn't go off around the world. I could not turn my back on what I had seen and what I had felt and what I had found out. Because if I did, I'd be as much a part of the destruction as Pacific Lumber Maxam. So I committed myself to doing whatever I possibly could to help protect these forests. But I didn't realize that was going to be what has now become an over year-and-a-half-long occupation of the tree known as Luna. People had placed a platform in Luna's branches because this over 1,000-year-old tree was marked to be destroyed, and it stands right next to a mudslide caused by the clear-cutting practices of Pacific Lumber on this hillside. That mudslide destroyed 7 families' homes in the town of Stafford below and destroyed their lives. And it's indicative of how destruction of our planet is destroying all life, whether you're an animal or a human or a plant or a tree. So activists using the light of the full moon in October as their guide assembled the platform in Luna's branches, which is how she got the name Luna. And when I came out here looking to get involved with the forest, the only thing that was happening at that time that people needed someone or were willing or accepting of me was this tree set. And so up into Luna's branches I climbed, and I've been here since December 10th of 1997, doing what I can to make the world aware and getting this tree protected.
That's great. There was last fall, I believe it was, in October, I believe, there was an activist who was protesting up in that same area named David Gypsy Chain, and he was killed by a tree falling. Do you know very much about this incident, or would you like to comment on this?
It was September 17th, sometime in the afternoon. Activists had been out in the area doing what is called monitoring. A lot of the times, people and activists do the work of the agencies, such as the Department of Forestry, the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the National Marine Fisheries Service, because these agencies will turn a blind eye if they're shown the right amount of money or pushed around by the right kind of power. And so instead of doing their job, they oftentimes allow others to violate the laws that they're supposed to be there enforcing and protecting. So, as is often the case, activists were out in the forest doing the jobs of the Department of Forestry and found what appeared to be some very serious violations. They called the Department of Forestry and said, please go out here and check these violations because we believe they're serious. This timber harvest plan should not be happening. The California Department of Forestry, which I call the California Department of Logging, because they tend to do a lot more for the timber industry than they ever do for the forest or the communities, they said, okay, we'll get to it. Well, the California Department of Forestry is famous for dragging their heels long enough for timber industries to take their 7-foot chainsaws and turn a forest into a clear cut. Then they go out at the pressure and insistence of citizens and go, oh, yes, there was a violation here. And they cite the company for a violation and a couple $1,000 fine and move on, even though the company has just violated the law, pushed species into extinction, caused mudslides, and raped the forest, destroying people's lives as well. They're given a few $1,000 fine, even though they've just extracted hundreds of thousands in the process. So basically, for companies like Pacific Lumber Maxam Corporation, it is more profitable for them to break the law than to abide by the law. So activists are constantly out in the woods doing the job of the agencies, and in this case, they were in the area. Knowing that the CDF would drag its heels, activists went out into the area again to try and slow down the loggers and maybe, hopefully, get them to even stop by showing them the violations that they were enacting in the woods. Activists do this many times. We put our bodies on the line as the last source of defense. As everything else is failing, we try and put our bodies on the line, hoping that timber fallers in industry will have at least a little more respect for the human life if they don't have it for the life of the planet. But in this case, the logger became enraged, A.E. Emmons, and began cussing the activist out, was caught on videotape cussing them out and threatening their very lives, saying he wished he had his gun on him because then he would take care of them. Then he's heard on the tape saying, get the blank out of the way, talking to one of his fellow loggers, I'm going to start falling the trees down into the draw. And the activist had run down into this gully, which is the draw that the logger was talking about, because he was getting so violent and so intense. They had run down there to try and regroup and decide what they were going to do. One tree came smashing down extremely close to them. They jumped up and started screaming to let him know that he almost killed them. He cut through a second one in their direction. Everyone was, of the 6 people there, were almost hit by the tree, including a friend of mine that has been my friend for about 5 years. He said that he dove as fast as he could, and when he stood up after the tree had fallen, he was covered in needles and twigs and branches because it had come so close. And 5 of the 6 activists stood up, but the 6th one was David Gypsy Tane, who was hit by the tree and killed. The logger and the timber company, Pacific Lumber Maxam Corporation, immediately began spinning their lies. Because activists had caught them on videotape, their lies were shown to the public, and they began retracting their statements. They did that a total of 3 times. To me, that's proof that not only do they not have a single ounce of respect for the planet's life, but they don't have a single ounce of respect for human life. Because if nothing else, they could have just said nothing. But to disrespect someone who has just died by spreading lies and rumors, knowing that they're lies, is a disrespect that still appalls me to this day and will make me sad and sick to my stomach forever. Because here was a young man, 24 years old, giving up everything he knew in his life to come fight for the forest, whose voice is only heard through humans. And the company decided to say things like, well, I'm sorry he's dead, but he was a trespasser. As if death is an appropriate response to someone walking onto land that belongs to the earth. A lot of energy was rallied around David Gypsy Chain's death. His body is no longer with us, but his spirit and his fire of commitment and passion lives on in every one of the activists that knew him, and every one of the activists who come to this area to fight for the forest all feel his energy with us. encouraging us to continue so that his death will not have been in vain.
You went through quite a few experiences yourself when you first got up into the tree. Do you want to talk about any of those?
Well, I think this has been one long, intense experience. The first 3 months were definitely difficult. The first 3 months broke me mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. There were fierce winter storms from the El Nino winter. The company cut down trees all around me, beginning December 11th, the first morning I was here. They cut 2 trees growing right out of Luna's trunk. Her family, her children, they cut right off of her base in an effort to scare us and divert our attention while they were sending up a deputized climber up another tree to try and get to us and bring us down. They obviously were unsuccessful. The company placed me under a 10-day security siege in an effort to cut off my supplies and starve me down. When they listened to me, I think I was telling them I might starve to death, but they wouldn't starve me down, that there was no way I was going to come out of the tree just because I was hungry, and that if they wanted my death on their hands, then so be it. But if they wanted me to come down, they'd better find another tactic. So then they began blowing air horns all night in an effort to cause sleep deprivation, which worked. And that was really intense because at the same time I was going through that, there was also the winter storms and these men shouting obscene things at me and threatening my life and running out of battery power for my phone, so I didn't have a way to communicate with the world, and a lot of things happening, just a complete onslaught on every level. The company also hovered a twin-propeller Chinook helicopter above my head in an effort to dislodge me, rip my tarps. I'm not sure what they were thinking or if they were thinking at all, but they hovered it very close above my head and once again lied to the public, saying that I was lying when I told the world what they had done. Once again, we had a video camera, and so I showed the world who was telling the truth and who was telling a lie. And Pacific Lumber was once again shown to be a company that has a hard time telling the truth. The hardest part for me was probably watching the forest disappear around me, because I feel a connection to the forest as deeply as I feel a connection to human beings. The loss I felt when I heard that David Gypsy Chain died felt like I had the inside of myself ripped out. And every time a tree smashed into the ground around me, I had that same feeling, hour after hour, day after day. And that was probably the hardest experience for me to overcome, because the animalistic response that we have as humans, the instinctual response, is to act like a wounded animal or an animal that is afraid and strike out. And much inside of me wanted to strike out, to stop the pain, to stop the violence, to stop the destruction and devastation. But I knew that to strike out would be a perpetuation of the violence I was trying to stop. And so out of one of the hardest struggles I've ever had in my life of witnessing a forest dying around me also came a lesson in the strength that I've never experienced in my life. And that was a lesson of love, of going to my higher self and finding love as a source for strength and commitment and clarity. Finding a way to send that love to these loggers even as they were destroying this hillside, destroying this forest, trying to destroy me and destroying the lives of the families down in Stafford below. Because I learned that all life comes from the same source through this experience, and that source of life is perfect love and light. So that even in the darkest of beings, they still come from that same source of love and light. They've just lost their way. And I cannot show others back to that source of life, which is the only way they will ever stop destroying it. I cannot show them the way back using violence, because violence only leads us to the darkness. I can only show them the way back through love. So in that suffering that I went through, in that being broken on every level, I was able to be rebuilt with the hands of love that have given me the strength to now continue for all this time.
Well, you've been up in Luna for about a little over a year and a half. What would it take to bring you back down on the ground? What kind of an agreement with Pacific Lumber or Maxam would be agreeable to you?
Well, the agreement that I gave to the higher power, to the Creator, is the ultimate agreement that I will abide by, which is that I would not allow my feet to touch the ground again, no matter what, until I had done everything in my power to make the world aware and to protect this beautiful, magnificent tree and what little is left of the grove around her. We've done so much as a team effort, and that's important to realize as well, that even the world has seen my face and heard my voice. It is only through the work of some other incredibly dedicated people, a wonderful team that has changed over time but continues to be a wonderful team, that it's helped us bring this message of love and respect through the issue of the protection of our forests, but getting to the deeper issue of how we relate to the earth and each other. And my team has been phenomenal in helping that message to reach the world in a way I could never have imagined being possible. But still, Luna and the surrounding grove is not protected. And every day I wake up and pray and ask, am I still being effective by being here? Am I still being effective in someday bringing about permanent protection for this priceless forest? And every day so far, the answer is yes. Pacific Lumber Maxam Corporation could protect what little is left here and hardly bat an eye. They were recently paid $495 million by taxpayers' money to protect a grove of forest that would have been protected if our government had merely enforced the Endangered Species Act. With all that money and hundreds of thousands of other acres that they are still slating to be destroyed to continue raping a profit from these forests, to protect this little tiny area would be not even a drop in the bucket for them. So I'm continuing to try and send them love, try and send them a feeling of I believe that there is goodness within them, and trying to empower that goodness so that they can find it within their hearts to protect this area, instead of staying in their corporate mentality of we won't give in to anyone because it's our land and we can do what we want with it. I'm trying to empower the intuitive sacredness that I know lies, even if it's completely covered by hate and violence and darkness. I know that there is a source of goodness in all beings, and it is to that within John Campbell, the president of Pacific Lumber, and Charles Hurwitz, CEO of Maxam Corporation, that I reach out to frequently, hoping that someday they'll get in touch with that better side and decide to protect Luna and what's left of the grove.
That you said Charles Hurwitz, isn't he the one that rose to power through junk bonds and then the savings and loan ripoff with in Texas? Yes.
Charles Hurwitz's trail to the top where he now finds himself is littered with broken laws, broken lives, broken promises, and destroyed lands everywhere you look. He took over a savings and loan during the Reagan era, where pretty much all laws that helped keep people decent were stripped away, and opened the doors for every crook out there in this country to capitalize at the expense of everything and everyone else. And unfortunately, Charles Hurwitz decided to capitalize on that as well, dealing very shady dealings through that savings and loan with partners Michael Milken and Ivan Boesky, both of whom were later charged and sent to prison and fined for their illegal dealings with money. Charles Hurwitz somehow has escaped the law every step of the way. And through that high junk bond wheeling and dealing that he did illegally, he hostily took over and illegally took over Pacific Lumber, at that time a family-owned and operated business. He did so, the process that he used, part of one of his many illegal dealings, caused that savings and loan to fail, costing the U.S. taxpayers $1.6 billion. Basically, that means that the taxpayers should legally own Pacific Lumber, Kaiser Aluminum, both companies that he acquired shortly after the failure of savings and loan. Both companies where paper trails lead back to that savings and loan. But instead of the government holding him accountable for his destructive, disrespectful, and illegal practices, they now paid him another $495 million of taxpayers' money for land that, although I don't believe land belongs to any one person, it belongs to all life. If it were to belong to people, it certainly wouldn't be Charles Hurwitz, especially after the history of how he acquired it. And he came in, he liquidated many of the long-time assets of the company. He raided the worker pension fund and doubled and in some cases tripled the rate of cut in the forest. He took over Pacific Lumber for $800 million. Last year, he refinanced the company. And you must realize that Pacific Lumber before Maxam had an almost non-existent debt. They had been operating for over 100 years. And the only debt they had was more of a working debt than a long-term debt. So when Charles Hurwitz Maxam Corporation took over the company, he then unloaded the $800 million debt that he incurred onto Pacific Lumber, which means onto the forests. After 13 years of liquidating these priceless forests, he turned around, actually 12 years, he turned around and refinanced the company for $900 million. So 13 years after all of this horrifying devastation and destruction, not only to the environment, but to the economy, to people's lives, Pacific Lumber now has $100 million more of a debt than it did when he took it over 13 years ago. And these are the practices, common practices of Charles Hurwitz, to illegally and through shady dealings take over companies, take them for all that they're worth, suck them dry, move the assets all the way to the top of the corporate ladder, where people have all the rights of individuals, yet none of the responsibilities. It then causes the business to collapse, files bankruptcy, and moves on to do it again. And through this experience, I've realized that government and corporations are hand in hand. They are one and the same, because there is no way any human being could get away with practices like Charles Hurwitz has propagated on Wall Street, in local economy, and in the forest without the help of government officials.
What are some of the related issues, that you would like to bring up as far as this type of behavior from corporations?
There's so many. In the forest issues, the most recent one is the Gap clothing empire, the Fisher family. They own Gap, Banana Republic, and Old Navy. And over the years, they have made quite a bit of money off of the clothing that they sell. Recently, it's been discovered that part of the reason they make so much money is because their clothes are made in horrific conditions in sweatshops in Saipan, where people are getting paid an unbelievable, disrespectful, and horrifying, pitiful amount. They're actually almost like indentured slaves for quite some time, because they have to pay a fee to a broker who brokers their lives to the corporation to make the clothing. And so the first thing they have to do is pay off that broker fee, which is astronomical, and then they're getting paid so little that it almost equals up to nothing by the time they're done, and they stay stuck forever in that machine of just barely getting by. Yet the corporation is one of the biggest that we have in this country. They are huge, and they have made billions and billions of dollars. And the money that they've made, they began an investment company. That investment company recently invested in Bob Fisher, the head fisher of the family. They invested in his son, John Fisher, to take over forest lands in Mendocino County. Mendocino County was so heavily logged by Louisiana Pacific, the prior company, that there's truly nothing left there to even sustainably harvest, let alone do what Mendocino Redwood Company, as it is now called, plans to do, what John Fisher of the Gap family empire proposes to do. They are spinning themselves to the world with their multi-million-dollar PR firm as applying for smart wood certification. So the world thinks that they really mean it, that they really care. But anyone at all, Pacific Lumber could apply for smart wood certification. That does not mean they would be approved. Yet all the world is hearing from the mainstream press, because of the multi-million-dollar PR firm and clout of the Gap empire, all the world is hearing is that this family is doing it right, and that they're doing it nicely, and that there is going to be an intact and healthy forest left when they're done. But there's not an intact and healthy forest there right now. What that area needs is restoration first. And this company is pretending to call itself restorative practices by clear-cutting and spraying herbicides. There's nothing restorative about that. There's nothing sustainable about that. There's nothing respectful or decent about that. And yet people continue to buy their clothes. I think it's really important that in today's world we realize that the corporate and government hand-in-hand structure that we now find ourselves in is destroying the quality of life for all beings, that everything and everyone in life becomes a target in their search for that dollar bill. But that ultimately, when we point at them, we have three fingers of responsibility pointing back. We have to take that responsibility seriously. We have to be willing to step out of the consumer cycle, because it is our dollars that is fueling the greed and the power lust of this corporate government structure. And so people have got to realize that we can no longer shop at these major corporations, because time and time and time again, when we take the time to search through their lies and their PR manipulative spins, we find that they're destroying people's lives, destroying our environment, destroying anything and everything as long as it makes them a profit. Another issue is Home Depot. Home Depot is a largely expanding home refurbishment center. They are the world's leader in the world's selling of the world's old-growth forest products. They are the largest. That means that not only are old-growth forests being destroyed around the world because of this company, but the indigenous cultures that are so vitally and intricately linked with many of these forests around the world are also being decimated and obliterated right along with the forest. Which means that if a consumer goes into Home Depot and spends $1.21 on penny nails, they're helping to destroy an old-growth forest. If they go in and buy a paintbrush to redo their walls, they're helping to destroy the old-growth forest. We've come to a point where we have to take responsibility, whether we are buying the actual product or not. If we are feeding this frenzy of destruction and so-called economic growth, irregardless of what else suffers, we are part of the problem, no matter what angle it is. And so we have to become part of the solution. And I believe that solution really lies in becoming conscious, in taking time. Our society today is so fast-paced that it's easy to lose touch. It's easy to lose consciousness. It's easy to lose that feeling of interconnection of all life and all life species. So it's our responsibility to take that time to think, to take that time to feel, to take that time to search the truth for its reality, not for a corporate spin. And then make our actions meet the truth that we find. Make our actions open a pathway for others to find that truth as well. And we have to find ways to use our money to support cottage industries, sustainable cultures, ways of living with the forest instead of destroying the forest. ways of protecting air quality and water quality and food quality with the money that we spend, whether it's 50 cents, $50, or $50,000. Every single cent is vital in shaping our world. And we have to decide to become more earth-centered and earth-based in our living styles. It's difficult. It's not easy. I'm not pretending that it is. But we can do things with the simple steps, like turning our windowsills into gardens, reusing every scrap of paper that we possibly can and every envelope that comes in the mail from friends or junk mail, that we can replace the paper towels in our house with hand towels. These simple things that add up and add up and add up. And if we take that responsibility on as an individual, the ripple effect will reach others, and through that we're going to see the change we need to protect our forests, to protect the planet that gives us life, and protect the lives of future generations who have a right to be heard, even though they as yet do not have a voice.
Going back to the El Nino storms that you went through, I know you got really close with the tree, and there was a certain spiritual connection between you and the tree, which I'm sure there still is. But could you tell us, what happened during that period?
Sure. The winter storms were pretty much ran really hard, almost continuously for 2.5 weeks. They were much longer than that, but the worst brunt of them was almost solid for 2.5 weeks straight. Just one after the other, getting more intense and more intense and more intense, culminating in a night where 70 mile an hour, 75 mile an hour winds was the average, and 90 mile an hour winds was the gust. It ripped branches out of Luna. It not only broke them off, it ripped them out. One that was the size of my elbow to my fist was ripped out of the trunk by these fierce winds. My roof, made of tarps, was pretty much completely shredded. Hail and sleet were flying through the shredded tarps, pummeling me. I was wrapped in a tarp, trying to maintain some form of sanity in the insanity of the entire experience. And the gust, every time a new gust hit, I got thrown because the platform was bucking all over the place. And the hardest one threw me about 3 feet. Part of me landed underneath a hammock that had been turned into my office, and the other part of me landed around a branch of Luna that came through the middle of the platform. So I literally got quite close to Luna because of the wind. And I grabbed onto Luna, and I began to pray. And I was praying because I didn't want to die. I was trying to rationalize in my mind that I cannot think of a better way to die than living for what I believe in, because so many people in life, including myself, die or almost die in horrible ways after only existing. And on many occasions in my life, on more than one, I've almost died. At that time, I was not really living. So to live for something greater than myself, to live for what I believe in, is such an incredible way to end my life. But at the same time, I was still very attached to my life. I had been learning a constant lesson of letting go of my attachment to my belongings, my comfortability, my old life. Everything that we take for granted, I was learning to let go of. And I thought I had pretty much conquered that battle, and then I realized that I still hadn't let go of my life. So even as I'm trying to rationalize the potential of my death, I was still going, I don't want to die, I don't want to die, I don't want to die. And so I began praying and asking for help and guidance, and I was saying, Luna, I want to be strong for you, I want to be strong for the forest, but I can't even be strong for myself right now. And I was trying so hard to hold on to life that my fists were clenched, my teeth were clenched, my muscles were clenched, everything in me was clenched as tight as it possibly could be, as if I just clenched tight enough I could hold on to my very existence. But it was driving me insane. It was the most intense experience I think I've ever had in my entire life. And Luna spoke to me my answer to prayer with Luna speaking to me. And Luna said, Julia, think of the trees in a storm. And the image began flowing through me, and as that image came to me, Luna continued to speak. She said, the trees in a storm, Julia, they know the power of letting go. They bend, they flow, they allow the wind to blow. That's how they make it through. The branches of the trees that try too hard to stand up strong and straight are the ones that break. Now is not the time for you to be strong, Julia, or you too will break. Learn the power of letting go. Let it blow and let it flow, and know that that's the way to make it through the storm, and that's the way to make it through the storms of life. And I did. I let go. Everything started unwinding. My fists unclenched, my teeth unclenched, my muscles unclenched. And I spent the next about 13 hours of the storm laughing and howling and crying and stuttering and mumbling and just going absolutely nuts. But in that process of letting go and just allowing the wind to rage and raging right along with it, I made it through a storm that I was absolutely positively sure was about to take my life. And instead, when the storm was done, I was still alive, and I had learned a lesson that will help guide me for the rest of my existence.
It's a great story.
Yes. It makes me tear up every time I say it, every time I tell it.
It definitely is a learning experience. And if people want to make a contribution, financial contribution to the group that is supporting you, or how would they do that?
They can make tax-deductible donations to the Trees Foundation. Those donations can be sent to Circle of Life, Post Office Box 388, Garberville, Garberville. That is in California, and the zip code is 95542. The Circle of Life Foundation is a group that I've recently helped start. It's not really a foundation. The word foundation is used because it is, to me, the people who are coming together to build the foundation of the vision that I see from these branches, which is the circle of life, the interconnectedness of all life. And that group is my team, who have been phenomenal in helping the outreach to happen, helping broaden the vision, and helping motivate and inspire people to get actively involved in their lives to make this world a more sustainable and loving existence. People can also call 707-923-9522 for more information on what we're doing and what's happening with the issues, anything they might possibly need.
Has there been any breakthroughs at all with any other further negotiations with Pacific Lumber, or have they had any desire to communicate at all?
Well, for the first 7 months, John Campbell, president of Pacific Lumber, refused to speak to me. Then after 7 months, he began talking with me. But it always sounded like I was listening to a computer printout from their gargantuan PR firm. And I would frequently check in with them, and he would start to share the rhetoric, and I would let him go and then say, thank you, John. I called to speak to John Campbell. I'll try back again some other time when there's not a computer printout coming out of John Campbell. And I have continued to write letters to Maxam Corporation as well as to John Campbell and Mary Bullwinkle, who is the spokesperson for Pacific Lumber. And the letters have really just been about love and respect and empowering the goodness in each other instead of using our differences to empower the darkness. And over time, I think it's kind of been the water wearing away at the stone. And now I have chances to speak with John Campbell on a more personal, human-to-human level. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll ever protect this area. But what it does show is that it is possible to break through the barriers and find the humans, the beings that we are underneath the pretense and the pretext and the barriers that we've built in ourselves to be.
Is there anything you'd like to tell the general public and about the situation, other than we've carried, than we've discussed so far?
Well, I think what I want to share with the general public, because the issues are always changing, and by the time you finish this project, who knows how much else will have changed. And so to me, the most important message to get across to people is that of empowerment, of realizing that every single one of us need to realize that it's not a matter of whether or not we can make a difference. It is absolutely that we do make a difference. Because everything that we say, even the things that we don't say, everything that we do and the things that we don't do, and even our very thoughts shape our reality. So it is that we do make a difference. So the kind of difference that we can make is up to each and every one of us. When people listen to me or look to me, I don't want them to see a superhero, because I can't change the world by myself. I can't save the world by myself. I can do my part, and I'm doing everything I know, but I can't do it all. We can save the world just as surely as we are destroying it right now. Through our daily actions, through the words that we speak, through the visions that we see, and manifesting those visions in our daily lives, that's how we're going to change the world. My hope is that people will see what I've done and listen to what I've said, and know that if I can do this, if I can go through these experiences and not only survive, but learn how to thrive, then they can find simple, small ways to begin making shifts in their consciousness, to the point where simple sacrifices will no longer feel like a sacrifice to them, but will feel like a gift to give to life, to give to beings, no matter whether they be human or otherwise. And that they will empower themselves to make change in our world, to get actively involved on whatever level they can to make this a more conscientious, that's a hard word to say,
yeah, it is.
loving and respectful world. And only through their involvement can we do it. We can do it together. We can do it in unity and solidarity and love, but we have to do it. And I hope that people will do something. Whatever it is, get involved in their daily lives, in their communities, in their homes, in their interactions with the earth and each other, and start living more simply and more consciously and more connectedly, because it is our actions that have brought us to the point where a woman has to live in a tree for 19 months to protect it. And it is our actions that can bring us back to a point where someone will never have to do it again.
Well said. I agree. It's great. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.